Funky Politics.
Welcome back to Funky Politics, the hardest hitting political show this side of the Mississippi River. COVID-19 is still here, folks, so are you still maintaining your social distancing? I hope so. You're washing your hands, you're wearing your mask, you're making sure you stay 6 feet, sometimes 8 feet, maybe sometimes 24 feet away from people. Make sure you take it because we need you around here. There's no way we can have a Funky Politics in the world, in America, anywhere, without you all, our listeners out there, okay? On today's show, we've got the one and only Rodney K. Strong, principal with Griffin Strong. When it comes to governments and the corporations wanting to seriously get their diversity and their inclusion on, they call this brother right here. They call Rodney Strong. The brother's out of Atlanta, Georgia. So grab your cup of coffee or a Jack and Coke, whatever you're into about this time of day. We'll be right back with more talk about Atlanta, COVID-19, and our good friend, well, I won't say our good friend, but we'll just call him the 45, President Trump, with Rodney Strong right here on Funky Politics. We'll be right back in just a second.
Riffin' on jazz.
When two friends get together to kick it
about jazz, it's called Riffin' on Jazz.
Catch us riffing on jazz every week right here on your favorite broadcast or podcast platforms.
Riffin' on jazz on the Kudzukian Network. Kudzukian!
We are back, and as I promised before, my very special guest on today's program on Funky Politics, of course, I am DC. We're sitting here with Rodney Strong, with Griffin Strong, PC, in the heart of Dixie, Atlanta, GA. Well, I don't know if y'all call that Dixie down there no more, Rodney, do you? They call you Dixie down there now. Y'all about to fight down there.
Well, you know, it's still Dixie, but it's a different Dixie.
It's a different Dixie.
Yes, sir.
Dixie right now got some sisters and some brothers down there.
That's
right
what I'm
now.
saying.
Y'all talk crazy down here right now. We're going to have something to do about it.
That's right.
Hey, Rodney, when it comes to inclusion and diversity, I mean, you of course, you're the very best in terms of helping governments and, of course, corporations get it right. But we're in a time right now where this COVID-19 has caused, I believe, in my opinion, I believe some of the focus to be taken off of the talk of inclusion and so forth. How do we, or has it hurt those efforts that you've been working on? You know, this new world order that we're dealing with right now, has the good work of companies and also governments, has it been slowed down because of this new threat to our way of life in this country?
It's definitely hurt every business because a lot of our businesses, African-American owned businesses in particular, are in the service industries. We're in logistics. Some of our businesses who are in logistics have done relatively well, but some of them have struggled because of this virus. But particularly those service industries such as restaurants and nightclubs and those low entry barrier businesses that we're in have suffered a lot. And quite frankly, anyone who does government contracting is going to suffer because the governments have spent enormous amounts of money to deal with this crisis. The tax revenues are going to be slow coming back in, and there's definitely going to be a cut in everybody's budget. My firm has already heard from several of our clients that they will not be moving forward with projects that we had already been awarded. So we know that budget cuts are coming and that those firms like mine that are not necessarily affected today are going to be affected tomorrow as the governments cut back on the work that they would have us do.
Now, you were just talking about those low entry, particular companies that or businesses that we own, like for instance the barbershops and beauty shops. You know, when it comes to I guess applying for those SBA loans, do they qualify? I mean, typically these are some businesses that may not run loans with a traditional bank, but they do banking, right? And they may do personal banking, but how are they going to be affected by this? I mean, I'm talking about the barber, beauty shops, the nail techs and things like that.
Well, that's really what I meant when I said service businesses.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of these businesses like that, restaurants, barbershops, beauty shops that we see in our community, they're really hurting because a lot of these businesses are operating on a cash basis. Yeah. You go in, you pay your barber usually in cash.
Yeah.
And so they don't have very strong banking relationships. Sometimes the owner of a shop might have a banking relationship where he has a mortgage for his shop or that kind of thing. In a lot of cases, the individuals who are working in it don't even get a salary. They're operating as an independent contractor. And the new law that the federal government put in place tried to deal with that, what they call the gig economy. But quite frankly, a lot of these people aren't tied into the banking system well enough to take advantage of it. That's why the money is all gone. And most of these people have not been able to take advantage of those opportunities.
Well, let's bring this thing back around to Atlanta. Atlanta, I looked at your numbers. Atlanta's running about a 22.4% rate of poverty. You're looking at 1 out of every 4.5 citizens that are impoverished. Even in Memphis, we're at 27.5. So, we're nothing to smile at, right? So we're a lot worse off than you guys. But people look at Atlanta as this huge mecca, which it still is a wonderful place to not only to live, but also to visit and to work. But now COVID has really shaken up the job markets down there, especially when you talk about those small businesses that have those low barrier entries into them. How does an impoverished Atlantean, one who was working in maybe, let's say, a service industry like a hotel, maybe she was a housekeeper, or he was a housekeeper, or he's a bar back or something like that. How do these folks survive with this new wave of what's happening in our world?
Yeah, I think that right now it's very tough. Fortunately, the expansion of unemployment insurance has helped a lot of people. And in this new round of funding, my understanding is that they're going to expand food assistance. So I think those two things are going to help. Our mayor has been very proactive, Keisha Lance Bottoms in Atlanta. One of the things she's done is put in place a loan fund for small businesses. She's also put in place homeless assistance, additional assistance for homeless. She's also put in place a ban on evictions during this period of time.
That's important.
And so there are a number of steps that she's taken to keep people from being made homeless and being made and this whole situation getting worse. When you look at the poverty rate in any predominantly African-American city, it's really tied to two things. It's tied to historic and current racial discrimination that tends to force Black people into jobs that are lower paying. And it's tied to the very low pay that service industry jobs receive. Now, the reality of it is we're recognizing that the people who are out on the front lines, who are serving you in the grocery stores, who are stocking the shelves, who are delivering the food, they're critical workers. They're essential workers. And yet they're not paid even a $15 an hour minimum wage, which is a living wage. And so the best thing we can do to reduce poverty is to increase wages for low wage workers.
Well, do you believe that this Congress, the present Congress, because I don't see the president being a person carrying a banner that says that I believe we need to talk to our corporations. And it's really, if you get corporations to do it, I would imagine small businesses, Rodney, would have to follow. And I understand, let's just say your firm, you having to adjust from paying, let's just say maybe your clerk, $10 an hour to now, because it's mandated $15. That's a huge stretch for a small business. So it helps. I won't say it helps, but it will hurt some in a different fashion that will help some.
There are a lot of studies that are out there. Conservative economists generally make the argument that a higher minimum wage is going to reduce jobs on the low end. The reality of it is that there are a lot of studies out there and they're very contradictory. There are studies on both sides. My firm pays $15 an hour minimum wage.
Wow.
I hired an intern last summer and I paid him $15 an hour minimum wage. He said he was shocked. He was saying, I've never been paid this much in my life. And I said, look, we're a small firm, but we believe that if you do work, you ought to be paid at least a $15 an hour minimum wage. And so, our position is that low wage workers need higher wages. Yeah. The reality of it is that the same people who are fighting not to pay a living wage are the same people who don't enforce the anti-discrimination laws.
Whoa. And
can be found discriminating against African Americans and other minorities in many marketplaces. You can go and look at what is filed as EEO cases in federal court, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. just Google it. You can find cases against many major corporations, companies right there in Memphis, companies in Atlanta, companies in other jurisdictions that are household names, but that have a history of racial discrimination. And so the best thing that the federal government can do is to raise the minimum wage and then aggressively enforce the laws that are on the books with regard to racial discrimination.
You just talked about major corporations, not only in Memphis, but around the country, but especially in Atlanta. So Rodney, I'm going to get into this diversity and this inclusion realm of life that you live in. So what does a successful diversity, equity, and inclusive corporate model look like that really takes on what we're talking about? You're talking about discrimination, unconscious bias. I mean, who's getting it right out there? I know you probably study this stuff every day. Somebody is getting this thing right in terms of at least one facet, and that's the unconscious bias piece that's prevalent in a lot of not only in corporate America, but also in government. Somebody out there is getting this thing right. Who's getting it right?
I will say that there are a few companies that I have worked with that are really aggressive about making sure that they deal with these issues. It takes a real commitment from the top, and it takes an effort to change the corporate culture. There's a major corporation that I will not name that I've been doing some work with. And they had a number of they had a major high profile class action lawsuit against them. They brought in a new CEO who had a commitment to diversity. They brought in a new general counsel who had a track record in civil rights law. They hired my firm to come in and work with them on a major project. And I'm going to tell you, it was a tough project because they had a culture of discrimination within that organization. Whoa. And we started making some substantial changes. And then after a while, after the heat died down, they sort of reverted to their typical format. And it became a typical discriminatory situation again. So, what I think you have to recognize is that these biases that we see on the corporate level are reflections of what we see in society. Sure. And so very often, if you are not consciously making an effort to deal with racial and gender discrimination in your workplace, you will find that it replicates itself if you're not constantly pushing forward to deal with these issues. And so if there is, to use a phrase that was made popular by Richard Nixon, if you're engaging in benign neglect, okay, if you're not dealing with these issues, the chances are that you're going to see bias in your workplace.
Whoa. Well, I tell you what, we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity, but I want to flip to something really quick because we only have a little bit of time left and talk a little bit about politics. The Trump campaign has an active outreach campaign geared toward the African-American community. At least they say they do. Matter of fact, I think they got an office down in Atlanta. Don't have one in Memphis, but they got one in Atlanta for whatever reason. And a couple of the talking points that they're saying that you should take a look at this president because he's done this. The HBCU investment, additional dollars of investment he made, and also the criminal justice reform. Just in your opinion, is that enough to get a sizable enough African-American voters to cross over and vote Republican? Because you're just not voting for him. Once you go in there, you say, I need to pull a Republican ballot. You got him and then you got whomever else is sitting out there. It's no jumping back across and I want to vote for Democrat now. You pull the Republican ballot.
Well, in a primary, that's the case. In the general election,
sure,
not necessarily. Right. But here's the deal. If you are looking at the entire range of issues that affect African Americans, voting for President Trump is the worst possible thing that you can do. What has happened is that there are a couple of issues that were already ripe to be dealt with, minor issues associated with criminal justice reform, a couple of other things that they can tout, a few dollars, not nearly enough, that have gone to HBCUs. But the reality of it is that all of the concerns that we have as a community, one, that we are protected from racial discrimination in the workplace, in doing business, in the marketplace, that we have legitimate opportunities to compete. There's recompense for some of the racial discrimination that we have faced historically and continue to face. The Republican Party is diametrically opposed to. Anytime an African American votes for any Republican, he is voting against his own interest. And that's because and I'm just being very clear on that. That's because they're putting in place conservative judges that are going to rule against equalizing opportunities when it comes to education, for instance. You know, back during the 60s, the Title I was put in place to equalize opportunities and to bring African American and other minority schools up to par. What happened is that when the Republicans got in, they started letting everybody get some of that money. Okay. They diluted it. What happened with the EEOC? The EEOC had investigators that would go out and would make investigations prior to issuing a right to sue letter. They would file class action lawsuits. When Reagan came in, he appointed Clarence Thomas, who now sits on the Supreme Court, to the EEOC. And what did he do? Roll back employment discrimination to the point where everybody gets a right to sue letter. And you go out on your own individually and hire a lawyer and try to see if you can fight this major corporation in a case. Finally, let me make one final point. When it comes to voting rights, what did they do? They abrogated the Voting Rights Act in the Shelby County decision. And so in every area that we fought for in the 1960s, every area, we have seen retrenchment that's come from the courts and that has come from the legislation that's been passed by Republican administrations. Look, this is a binary choice. You either go for one or another. Yes, there are people on the left within the Democratic Party who are rightfully critical of some of the neoliberal strains within the Democratic Party, who are rightfully critical of some of the stances on criminal justice and other issues that the Democrats have taken. But when you look at it from an overall standpoint, we really don't have a choice. As African Americans, we have to vote for our interests, and our interests are served by the Democratic Party, not the Republican Party. They're hostile to African American interests. And finally, I just want to say Donald Trump has empowered white supremacists and white nationalists in this country in a way that they have not been empowered since the 1960s.
Whoa.
And so we see a level of activity and violence among those people toward our community that we have never seen in the last 50 years.
You heard it here first, right here on Funky Politics. Well, we always keep it real, we keep it right, and we keep it funky. And Rodney, that is some funky, real right stuff you just said there, Doc. And speaking of Joe Biden is going to be, or is the Democratic nominee for president. He came out early and he said he would choose a woman to be his running mate, Rodney. Is there any wiggle room? Can he say, well, I see something else in someone else. I see something in maybe Governor Newsom, or I see something in Governor Cuomo that may help us bring the country together and build it better? Or are there plenty of good women candidates out there, which they are, that he's going to stick with what he said? Is he that, I'm assuming he's that kind of guy, right?
I think that he is locked into choosing woman as his running mate. Yeah. I think the question is who that woman is going to be. I think it's probably going to be one of three women. And I think the two leading candidates are probably Senator Klobuchar and Senator Kamala Harris. Full disclosure, I know Senator Harris very well. I have supported her since she first ran for district attorney in San Francisco, and I supported her when she ran and when she was the attorney general in California and when she ran for the Senate. And so I'm personally supporting her candidacy, but we will see. The nominee will make that choice. And quite frankly, I think that I would be satisfied with any of the women that he has basically said he's probably going to choose a woman who ran for president. So I would think it's going to be Senator Warren, Senator Klobuchar, or Senator Harris. And so I would be pleased, quite frankly, with any of those choices, although I personally support Senator Harris. I don't know her very well personally, but I think she's a very bright person. I've only met her one time. I'm general counsel for the Fulton County City of Atlanta Land Bank Authority, and we had a transaction when she was deputy city attorney. She walked into the room and she immediately grasped all the issues. And I thought, wow, this is one of the smartest young lawyers I've ever seen. Wow. So, I mean, she's clearly highly competent and very talented. But I think that when you have someone like Senator Klobuchar that's been United States senator elected from an entire state, or Senator Harris, who's been the attorney general for the whole state of the most populous state in the United States and been a United States senator. Quite frankly, I just think that they're going to have to go with somebody who has proven that they can win statewide in a major state.
Let's keep talking about your place, Georgia. You got Senator Loeffler down there, and of course Representative Doug Collins. They're in a battle for the Republican nomination, and Reverend Raphael Warnock, who happens to be the pastor down there, pastor in Atlanta. What are the chances for him in the Democratic primary? Have you kind of gauged that race at all?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I think that definitely it's going to be a runoff between Senator Reverend Warnock. See, I'm already making him a senator. Reverend Warnock. This must have been elevated. He don't even know it yet. One of the two Republicans. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Reverend Warnock and one of the two Republicans. OK, I think Loeffler, she was appointed by the governor. Yeah, but I think she's got some problems, given the fact that, she has engaged in what appears to be, she's certainly created an appearance of impropriety with regard to some of her stock trades. That's right. And then I think that Doug Collins, who quite frankly has proven to be a Trump loyalist and an ideologue, is certainly going to be somebody who's going to give her a real run for her money. So I can't say who is going to emerge on the Republican side, but I'm confident that Reverend Warnock is going to emerge as the Democrat that's going to end up in the runoff. The question is, can he win a runoff? Yes. The demographics in Georgia have changed tremendously. You mentioned Stacey Abrams earlier. She lost by only 50,000 votes with extremely high turnout of both Democrats and Republicans in the state. Historically, we've been losing these races for the last 10 years since the first Republican was elected. Sonny Perdue, who's now the Secretary of Agriculture, defeated Governor Roy Barnes, who was our last Democratic governor. I believe that was in 2002 or 3 when he won his first race and upset our Democratic governor. And since that time, Republicans have been winning the state by about 200,000 votes. Stacey Abrams cut it to 50,000 votes, which is why she's in the conversation for vice president. And I think it's possible that Reverend Warnock might knock off the Republican, but it's going to be a hard race. Yeah. And we shall see, turnout. Turnout is the key. Voter suppression is real. The Republicans realize that they have to suppress the African-American vote in order to win. Black folk in the South aren't confused about who these Republicans are. So they are going to be voting against them here in Georgia. Right. The reason that Trump has gotten office in Atlanta is because he's coming at the heart of our strength. One of his strategies is always go at the people who oppose me the most. And his greatest opposition, obviously, is coming from Black folk in the South, because those of us who have been around for a while know what we have to face when we face people who have tendencies toward white supremacy and white nationalism.
Well, Brother Strong, man, you laid this thing out for us today, guy. You have really laid it out for us today. But check this out. Before we get out of here, is there any closing thoughts you got out there, man? Whether it be COVID-19, Atlanta, America, DEI, Just some thoughts off. Leave us with an inspiring word, brother, because a lot of us are locked in the house right now. We can't go nowhere. We can't go out to eat dinner. We can't do this. We're just out here in this. It's almost like a haze, man. Just something that we've never seen before in our lives.
Well, my closing thought comes from Dr. Martin Luther King. In his letter from Birmingham jail, he talked about the fact that we are in an inescapable network of mutuality, that what affects one directly affects all indirectly. And so now we see that. You can say, well, the guy that's stocking the grocery store, he's not important. The guy who's just loading the boxes or picking the fruit or at the meat packing plant, they're not important. But when you're stuck in your home dealing with a virus that can strike anybody, anytime, anywhere, you realize that everybody is important. And therefore, we ought to value everybody. And that's what the lesson I think that comes out of this is. And I think we ought to uplift everybody when we move forward out of this dark day that we're in today.
Hey, Rodney, man, I appreciate you stopping by. Funky Politics, as always. You're always welcome to come back. You are our guy on the ground in Atlanta. We look to you for a lot of sage advice, and we really appreciate you giving our listeners an earful. I would say an earful. Thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you so much.
I will see you again. We'll be right back with more closing thoughts right here on Funky Politics in just a second.
I feel good and make love good.
Oh.
R&R on Sports.
1968 Olympian Dr. John Carlos.
Oh, man, it's an honor. They need to pick up their radio and tune you guys in.
There you go.
It's R&R on Sports.
And we are back right here on Funky Politics. Did I not tell you? Did I not warn you? Rodney Strong is the man. He's the GOAT. When it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, Rodney's firm, Griffin Strong in Atlanta, is called on by numerous corporations in this country, by numerous governments in this country, to help them get it right when it comes to the inclusive part and the diversity. And Rodney is a great attorney. He's done some wonderful work in trying to make sure that people answer for some of the wrongs that they've committed in the past, and that they straighten them out. And I tell you right now, that brother right there is deep. Atlanta, y'all. It's still open for business. They're sheltering in place down there, just like we are where we're at here in Memphis, Tennessee. We hope that you're sheltering in place where you are. We want you to make sure you always observe that social distancing piece. Make sure you wash your damn hands. Wash your damn hands, right? And the new thing now is to wear your mask. Most governors now are talking to their citizens in their state and saying, hey, look, wear your mask when you're out in public. You go into the grocery store, put your mask on. You go into the gas station, put your mask on. You go into some other particular public arenas, put your mask on. It's not going to hurt you. I promise you it's not going to hurt you. I wear mine all the time. So until next time, and I want it to be a next time, I want you to be around. So observe all of those things that the CDC is asking us to do, okay? And we'll see you again right here back on Funky Politics, where we keep it real, we keep it right, and we always keep it funky. See you next time.
Funky Politics, recorded at Kudzukian Studios, directed, produced, and distributed by Kudzukian.